There's been a years-long debate raging on social media between Star Wars fans about what is a realistic timeline for training as it compares to abilities in the Force. This debate originates from one side, saying that Rey simply did not receive near enough training to perform certain abilities, while the other side claims that her training was not much different from Luke's because Luke was only on Dagobah with Yoda for a short period of time, or a few days. Canonically, we know Rey was with Luke on Ahch-To for 2 days, as The Last Jedi takes place over 3 days and piggybacks The Force Awakens, which also takes place over a few days as well, making the time Rey realizes her Force intuition to the end of The Last Jedi taking place over about a week. So in order to justify Rey's abilities, it would seem natural to assume Luke could have only trained for a few days as well. Simply watching The Empire Strikes Back, one might draw that conclusion without really thinking about it. However, the prequels certainly pursued the notion that Jedi needed training, and training over an elongated period of time. This would certainly mean that whatever time Luke spent on Dagobah would point to an accelerated training timeline, but how much so? Let's look at this logically and scientifically, as far as we can, as it is a movie and it is not properly defined. So let's take things as far as we can go and then allow the film to fill in any gaps to come to a reasonable conclusion and discover if, in fact, both Luke and Rey's abilities buck the prequel's established narrative of the elongated training period. First, it is necessary to find out the distance between Hoth and Bespin. This is vital in understanding how long it would take for Han, Leia, C-3PO, and Chewie to travel from Hoth to Bespin without a hyperdrive, as well as adding the correct amount of time they would have spent inside the giant space worm on the asteroid. Canon sources say Hoth is 50,250 light-years from the core, and Bespin is 49,100 light-years from the core. So the closest they can be is 1,150 light-years apart. Now, if the galactic disk's height difference is taken into account, the furthest away these two planets could be from one another is about 5,000 light-years apart. For this exercise, however, we will go with the shortest possible distance of 1,150 light-years. A light-year is just under 6 trillion miles. This means that to travel from Hoth to Bespin, we are looking at just under 6.9 quadrillion miles. Yes, despite Disney's best efforts, a galaxy is a massive, massive place. Even two planets considered to be very close together are very far away. This was one reason the debate over how close all the planets in the Hosnian system were in The Force Awakens sprung up, because we can literally see them all getting blown up at the same time from very short distances. The Millennium Falcon's main hyperdrive could have gotten them to Bespin in just over an hour, as it could travel at 1,041 light-years per hour after Han illegally doubled the factory hyperdrive on the Falcon. He essentially made it double the Empire's legal limit, which was twice the speed of Imperial hyperdrives. However, as we know, this hyperdrive is not functioning and needed to be fixed on Bespin. The regular cruising speed of the Falcon is 1,050 kilometers an hour or 652 miles per hour. In this exercise, we will assume Han still had his backup hyperdrive so as to make the trip as short as possible, much like we assume the planets' distances apart are as short as possible. Essentially, we are trying to achieve the shortest possible timeline in order for there to be no argument as to the time it could have taken the Falcon on this journey. A 10 HCR backup hyperdrive travels at 20 times less the speed of Han's 0.5 HCR black market hyperdrive. The 0.5 travels at close to 1 billion miles per hour. So the backup, which we aren't shown was even used in the film, but again, for the sake of argument we're going to use, can travel 50 million miles per hour. That means to travel the 6.9 quadrillion miles from Hoth to Bespin using the backup hyperdrive would take 138 million hours, which is of course ludicrous. And this is where the movie needs to step in, as at the time when it was filmed, the filmmakers weren't considering all of these calculations so rigidly. Han and the gang also stopped for an unknown amount of time on the asteroid inside the giant space worm, which would have meant it took even longer. All this to say, we simply can't get an accurate number for the amount of time it really took the Falcon to travel from Hoth to Bespin, because it wasn't accurately taken into account by George Lucas and others. Most of the calculations about ship speeds in Star Wars have been defined after the original trilogy was produced, other than a few lines of dialogue from Han. All told, the Falcon never uses the backup hyperdrive in The Empire Strikes Back, and the cruising speed to make the trip would take thousands of years. In hindsight, the issue of how much time passed as they traveled from Hoth to Bespin is simply unknown. But the question you have to ask yourself is it possible it traveled, stopped, and shut down power on the asteroid and then continued on to Bespin and did so in a matter of a few days? At the very least, we must concede this to be impossible. So what conclusion do we draw? The book, from a certain point of view, has Yoda saying that Luke trained for a few weeks. Is that canon? It's hard to say, because Matt Martin of Lucasfilm Story Group notes that not everything in the book can be considered canon. So here we are. We're left with a decision to make. Does it make sense to support the idea that Luke spent close to as little time actually training as Rey did in The Last Jedi while he was with Yoda on Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back? Or are we at this point just making that assertion to justify Rey's virtually innate and ease of progress in terms of Force abilities? It would seem that Luke spent considerably longer, or at least as long as Yoda's statement of a few weeks. that would at least be more believable than Han reaching Bespin with no hyperdrive in just a few days, with Luke arriving from Dagobah shortly thereafter. Now, obviously, that still is an extremely, extremely fast amount of training. As we know from the prequels, it took a long time to, it took years for guys to get to the point where they're super powerful. Having said that, when Luke fights Vader on Bespin, he loses quite handily, and Vader is more or less just toying with him because Vader would like him to join him. He's not actually trying to defeat Luke. As we know, when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy, we need some believability to be drawn into the story, which is why so many of us simply can't accept Rey's incredible abilities with so little knowledge and understanding of the Force and so little time being involved with it. Are you going to accept that Luke spent 2 days on Dagobah, or does it make a lot more sense that he probably spent weeks, if not longer? Let me know in the comment section. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Check out any other Star Wars content. If you do like this, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And have yourselves a really good day.